And what about his? Hello, good afternoon. You are locked into ReviveFM 94.0 on the Power Hour with myself, your host today, Louise Power. This show is about community matters, diversity and inclusion, a platform for women, leadership, entrepreneurship and inspirational stories. And today I am really blessed to have my uncle in the studio today, known to me as Mr. Terry Duncan, known professionally as Lessep T. Duncan. Welcome to the show, Uncle.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Very honored to be here today. Privileged to be a guest on Revive.
Thank you, Uncle. And today's show is about, we're going to be discussing the cultural factors of Alzheimer's and family care in the Black community, a very important subject. And this is something that my uncle has been working on. He's been working with the Alzheimer's and dementia community. He has a lot of information that he's going to be sharing today. So we're going to be having a really nice, relaxed. Is this your first radio interview?
Definitely, yes. So please forgive any nerves you might detect, please.
Don't worry, Uncle. This is his first radio interview, so bear with him. And actually, it's going to be a very relaxed, organic conversation. Okay. So don't worry. I'll be here to guide you and speak to you and talk through it. So I'll be here by your side all the way through. So perhaps we should just talk about dementia and Alzheimer's and what that is for the people in the back, as we say, that may not be familiar with Alzheimer's and dementia. Would you just like to just tell us a little bit about what that is?
Well, first thing I want to just do a disclaimer that I'm not an expert in dementia or Alzheimer's. My avenue into Alzheimer's disease and related dementias basically was related to my work with caregivers, people who take care of people who have Alzheimer's or dementia, specifically people in our community, the Black community. But anyway, dementia is, to distinguish dementia from Alzheimer's, basically dementia is what we call the umbrella, and Alzheimer's is just one form of dementia. Dementia basically comprises the majority or the main types of dementia you have is Alzheimer's. Basically, that is the main type of dementia. Then you have like a frontal temporal dementia. You have vascular dementia. You have Parkinson's dementia, and then there's a Hodgkinson's type of dementia. So those are less prevalent when it comes to dementia. Alzheimer's is the predominant, and it is a growing disease that's affecting more and more people. Basically, Alzheimer's affects initially the memory, or predominantly the memory, and eventually it does affect all types of cognitive and behavioral functioning. So once you are afflicted with Alzheimer's, then it's usually a slow progressive decline of initially mental, and then that's basically going to affect you. Basically, you basically forget how to use your physical abilities as well. Initially, it's memory, then it affects you physically.
Thank you, and thank you for so much for the synopsis and explaining to everybody what Alzheimer's and dementia is. And I read one of your academic papers, and it was describing dementia and Alzheimer's and the difference, which I really wasn't, it was the first time that I was reading some of these things. It was really interesting. And I know that dementia causes memory loss, confusion and needing help with daily tasks, problems with language and understanding, and changes in behavior. And one of the things from your paper that I found particularly interesting is that sometimes I didn't realize that there was so much of a difference actually between, I know that they're related, but there's a difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. And then I read as part of your paper that Alzheimer's is actually sometimes not confirmed until somebody actually passes away?
That is pretty much what it is right now. There are newer tests that are coming onto trying to avoid the word market, but basically there are new types of or new ways of testing someone for Alzheimer's, but it's not really been confirmed as such. I mean, they will do like PET scans, but now the newest form is some blood tests. But even then, you can get, the blood test can show like symptoms or signs that someone has Alzheimer's. If they see like a buildup of protein, which is, causes Alzheimer's basically is caused by buildup of protein in the brain, which they call tangles and plaques, which basically affects your neurons in the brain, kills the neurons, eliminates the synapses, and obviously the brain deteriorates. So, but anyway, there are these newer types of tests, but even when they detect certain levels of protein, it's still not sure. I mean, it shows you the signs, and obviously some of the experts in the field are sometimes a little bit reluctant to use these tests because once you have Alzheimer's, there's still no cure as such. There are newer and newer medications coming out, which slows down the progress of the disease. But some, as I say, some doctors and experts are kind of somewhat reluctant, and some patients are reluctant to be tested and find that they may have this protein, because once you have it, it's kind of like not going to go away.
Yeah. Is this protein, Terry, is this protein inherited protein, or is it something that is indiscriminatory? Anybody can get this protein, which is basically a primary cause.
Again, it's unsure. There's nothing definitive in terms of really. I mean, a lot of work has been done on Alzheimer's, but still there's no known people. There is no known cause, and there's still no known cure. But a lot of work is being done on it. I mean, they say that the risk factors for Alzheimer's primarily is age. The older you get, the more likely you're going to develop Alzheimer's. Then they talk about genes, that if your parents or someone in your family had it, then there's a possibility you're going to have it. Again, my research, I say my road into Alzheimer's, again, came from caregiving, and specifically caregiving in the Black community. So what I found, again, is that the Alzheimer's is growing fastest in our community, in the Black community. And one of the reasons, and again, there are issues with that, but there's a particular gene, there's an APOE4 gene, I think it is, which apparently is more prevalent, supposedly, in the Black community. And once that gene is affected, they say that you're more likely to get Alzheimer's. Again, it's more likely, it's all correlative as opposed to causative. I said they still don't know what causes it. They have certain markers and certain signs that they say is related to developing Alzheimer's. But again, there's no specific cause. And as you indicated earlier, the only time that they can really definitively say that yes, someone has Alzheimer's is autopsy.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. And just hearing about the APOE4 gene, I mean, that just blows my mind, because it's this, it just goes to show that there's been quite a lot of research done. And whilst you were talking, I was just thinking about, how far have they come? Can they detect that gene? And as part of some of the work that you've done so far, I know that the higher rates of Alzheimer's within the Black community are associated with several risks, being higher prevalence of vascular conditions deriving from high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, and environmental factors related to socio-economical attainment, like lower income and living in less advantaged neighborhoods, poorer access to healthcare. And those things even within my work as, in diversity and inclusion and social value are really important to me. And, that's a really, really vital piece of information, isn't it, Terry? Because it just goes to show why people in the Black community are ever so more susceptible to getting Alzheimer's, and some of the reasons why the government and its partners need to do more so that people in the Black community aren't automatically more have more higher possibilities of actually getting Alzheimer's than anyone else indiscriminately, because that is a form of discrimination, inequality, and the list goes on.
Definitely. I mean, obviously, there's a lot there to kind of unpack. The issues, just to kind of backtrack a little bit. I mean, even as I said, a lot of progress has been made towards addressing Alzheimer's, but a lot of the research that's been done, like the testing that's been conducted, is primarily with people from the white community. So even though that they have kind of made progress in terms of trying to identify, the signs and some of the factors that lead to it, we still can't say. I mean, the question that raises the question: okay, well, these things we know can lead to Alzheimer's or possibly lead to Alzheimer's, but is it the same for all communities? And the fact that we are a distinct community facing different factors and different socioeconomic situations. And again, my research also indicates historical trauma, legacies of racism, legacies of discrimination, and the fact that the effects that those have on the body. I mean, we've come to terms with a lot of discrimination, and we kind of to some degree, we incorporate it in our lifestyle or the way we live our lives, but it does affect us. And the fact that, it may not be seen explicitly, there are internal impacts and effects that, causes levels of stress, which again, is one of the factors that will lead to development of Alzheimer's. So yes, our environment is a big issue, which is more my line as opposed to the genetic and the
like the genetic factor, like the ins and outs and the genes and all of that.
Right.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as you're speaking, it's making me think just everyday life. I mean, the way in which when you come from lower socioeconomical backgrounds, and just being a person of color, being a Black person, I feel like there's a part, if you are in a minority group in a part of the world, then you have to use your brain so much more, and maybe a part of your thinking and just everyday kinds of conceptualizing life all around what you look like and what those environmental factors are going to mean for you. And that must have a strain on us as Black people, having to churn over that all the time.
Well, I mean, again, like I say, I mean, and I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, which is like the crux of what I try to focus on in terms of, addressing, what can be done, and basically, like I say, my focus is on the people that are caring for someone who has Alzheimer's, and that there's that level of stress, there's that level of strain, and if we're not involved in the clinical trials, if we're not involved in the testing and the research that's needed to develop new ways of addressing Alzheimer's, then are we going to benefit from it? I mean, again, it's to me from the professional's point of view, medical view, social service point of view, there's a lack of understanding or sensitivity when it comes to the reasons why people from the Black and minority communities are not involved in the research. They're not involved in the trials. You know, I mean, there needs to be an understanding and a way to kind of like build a bridge to develop a level of trust, so that, you know, they can incorporate you know, people from the Black community into the research. So that's a big issue. That's a big area that needs to really be developed, because, you know, when you look at some of the ways that we've been treated, as you mentioned or indicated, you know, people need to understand why there is that lack of trust, and why we feel there is that discrimination, there is that racism, there is systematic racism, that even when we do go to the doctors or do seek medical attention, that we don't feel that we're getting the same level of care as other communities. So those things need to be addressed, and then maybe we'll get more and more people from the Black community involved. We'll get better or more accurate types of treatments, more relevant types of treatments. That because my whole thing is, you know, it's about the trust, you know, and different people are going to need different types of care. So you can't just have one blanket form of treatment. You know, we need to really find out where or how Alzheimer's is affecting not just the people who have Alzheimer's, because, you know, that is a big issue, but my focus is on how it's affecting the families that have to care for them. So that's kind of where my focus is, and I think there is a whole area of research and attention that needs to be placed on the families that are taking care of people with Alzheimer's.
100%. Yeah, thank you ever so much. I remember reading your paper where there was some, in terms of discrimination and disparity, some of the families were saying that people, the barriers, feel as though they're not being listened to. So they're going to receive medical intervention, treatment, and actually they're not being listened to. And, you know, if people that are working within those medical fields as well are not included, you cannot be what you cannot see.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so if you're not represented, then it's almost as if there isn't a space for you. If there isn't a lot of research about particularly how it's affecting people that look like you, people that come from a similar culture, then automatically you're going to feel like this is a bit awkward. You know, I'm not included in that space. And statistically, you know, for example, in the States, there's 5.6 million people currently that have Alzheimer's. 7 million, we're looking at 7 million by 2025, 14 million by 2050. Here in the UK, there are 982,000 people living with dementia, looking to rise to 1.4 million by 2040. And at the moment, I don't know how accurate it is, because I've been looking at this morning that it says there's only 25,000 people from minority groups here in the UK that have Alzheimer's. Could it be that there are more people, Terry, that have Alzheimer's here, but like you said, some of these misconceptions, people not sharing, keeping it to themselves, and are worried about sharing the information, how they're going to be treated? Actually, they're not telling people, don't know.
For sure. I mean, I think the NHS, I think, indicates that Black people are less likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you know, predominantly because we don't go to the doctors and we're not looking for that. Secondly, when we have a family member with Alzheimer's, we're going to look at it, oh, that person's just old. Just senile. We're not looking at it as being Alzheimer's. I mean, there's a stigma of mental disease in our community as well, and we're not taking it. You know, we're not calling it Alzheimer's. And then obviously when we do go, doctors are less likely to diagnose it as well, you know, because they don't give us the level of attention that they would other communities. Yes, I think, again, research indicates that we as a community would like to see doctors of our own, from our own community. But one other issue that I think is important and that I've been working on as well is that even if you are from a different community, there's something called cultural humility, which is where you mentioned the word listen, where basically, you have to kind of put your own prejudices, your own biases, because we have to admit we all have biases, we all have prejudices. You have to try to put those to one side and, as you indicated, listen. It's all about creating that open space for someone to kind of convey their experiences and convey their situation, and allow them to convey. You don't impose your way of thinking on someone else. So this is where I say that there have to be services and treatments that are geared towards people's experiences, not what you define to be their experiences, not what you define. Okay, well, this is what you're going through. This is what we need to do. No, before you kind of prescribe, as you indicate, let's listen and see what the situation is from that person's perspective, because caring for someone with Alzheimer's is a really, really difficult thing to do, and again, because it's so difficult, because us as a community feel that we're not listened to, people aren't paying attention to our situation, we just go and do what we have to do, essentially. And that doesn't mean that it's not difficult. That's the whole thing. And that doesn't mean that we don't need help. But we don't need specific help. So we need specific help. We just don't need general help. We need specific help.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so if there are less people that are from Black or minority backgrounds with that medical expertise, and then less people coming forward, then we then have access to less information automatically. And when you mentioned we all have our own biases, I think that's really important for us to be vulnerable enough to delve into and examine and discuss and say, hey, look, we all have our own biases, but it's about being able, isn't it, to acknowledge those biases,
Right.
where, how we grew up, where we come from, and actually those professionals being able to then listen to people that speak different languages, come from different cultural backgrounds, applying that cultural humility to the way that people talk, how they speak and how they communicate, because vital information can really be missed when people don't listen. So we're going to go into a break in a couple of minutes, but what I'd really like to do when we come back is delve into the carers part side of things, and the way in which the carers in the Black community have real difficulties accessing support in comparison to people from the white and white majority communities in sort of like the Western hemisphere of things. So we're just going to go into a very, very short commercial break. And then when we come back, we'll be delving a little bit deeper into what it means to be a carer for somebody in the Black community suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. So please do not touch that dial. We'll be right back. Into the Power Hour with myself, Louise Power. This show is about community matters, diversity and inclusion, a platform for women, leadership, entrepreneurship and inspirational stories. And today I've been very privileged, very blessed to have my uncle, Mr. Terry Duncan, also known professionally as Lessep T Duncan, in the studio. And he has been discussing the cultural factors of Alzheimer's and dementia, family care in the Black community. Welcome back. Welcome back, Terry.
Thanks.
And just before the break, we were just about to delve a little bit deeper into the caregiving side of things and how that affects people in the Black community. I'm going to hand it back over to Terry to just talk about really the impact and what that means about, how it affects people in the Black and minority communities.
Thanks again, Louise. So basically, some of my research basically found that, caregiving per se is difficult. Trying to take care of somebody, as much as you may love that person, just living with somebody can be difficult sometimes. When that person needs help with bathing, dressing, eating, how difficult that can be. When that person then has Alzheimer's or dementia on top of that, and when they sometimes don't even remember your name, somebody, husband or wife, father or mother doesn't even remember you, then you can realize how emotionally difficult that can be. But when it comes to Alzheimer's in the Black community, as I mentioned earlier, it's growing fastest in our community. As a community, we tend to provide more care, more hours of care, more days of care for family members that have higher levels of need. So it's going to take its toll more so on, the people from our community. But the research indicates that people from our community are less likely to complain about it. We're less likely to look for help about it. We're less likely to be stressed about it. I'm not so sure that's the case in terms of us being so stressed. I think there is a level of stress that we have. It's just that we manifest our stress in different ways. And I think that's where, the acknowledgement of cultural differences needs to be addressed. It's not a question that caregiving is less difficult in our community. It's just as difficult as it is in all communities. It's just that we have different ways of approaching it. And that is where, let's say, the professionals need to acknowledge. Us as carers, caregivers, members of our community, we need to acknowledge the fact that we are caring for someone, as opposed to saying, okay, that's my mother, that's my father, that's my wife, that's my husband, that's my brother, my sister, whatever. We need to acknowledge that, yes, as historically, culturally, it's what we do, yes. More so probably than other communities. We are going to look after our own. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are certain historical factors because of that, because we don't get help from anywhere else, we do for ourselves. But there are times when we do need help. And when we do, we need to acknowledge that we need that help. And we need to acknowledge what we're doing as caregivers. Again, as I said, research indicates that we have this sense of responsibility to care for family members. Sometimes we look at it as a duty, an obligation. And don't get me wrong, I think that caring for someone, or even caregiving to some degree, because there is a distinction, but certainly caring for somebody is a great thing to do. I think it would be great if the whole world was caring for each other, if we kind of thought about the other person rather than just think about ourselves all the time. So it's a great thing to do, but we need to recognize that caring for somebody, when we feel it's an obligation, it's going to have a negative impact on us. So where it is an obligation, where it is because somebody is totally reliant on you, and that's what happens with Alzheimer's. Eventually that person is going to become reliant on you, and your relationship with that person is going to change. You're gonna, that used to be your wife. You guys used to do things together. You used to have conversations together. May see things slightly different. Once that Alzheimer's kicks in, obviously you have to speak for them. You've got to represent them. You've got to advocate for them, as well as doing the physical things for them. So that relationship is going to change, and we have to acknowledge there are changes. One thing I will kind of also, emphasize is that we don't want to take away, and the professionals should not be taken away from the fact that that is still a family member. And as I said, as our community, we take care of our families. We do not want to take anything away from that, but we need to acknowledge, from our point of view, we need to acknowledge that we are now becoming more of a caregiver rather than a person that cares for our loved ones. We are caregiving for them. And as a caregiver or a carer, there should be services out there for you. There should be, help out there for you. There should be support out there for you. But as a caregiver, as a carer, we need to take on that role, acknowledge ourselves in that role, and then reach out to get the help that we need. From the professional side of, as I said, yes, professionals are going to provide to some degree services, support for caregivers. But as I was mentioned earlier, professionals need to acknowledge and respect the fact that we still see ourselves as people taking care of family. So they need to remember and acknowledge that family relationship as they provide services for caregivers.
Yeah, and how the way that caregivers may need support themselves because they're also caring, and how interdependently things may happen for them in terms of impacting their own mental health and well-being. And I wanted to ask, do you think we need to have a lot more knowledge and information in the Black community so that people aren't just having to pick up on what does Alzheimer's mean when it happens, and all the impact and trauma and stress when it happens to one of our family members? Because why don't we know more before we have to actually have a primary example of somebody, something like that happening to one of our family members? Why don't we know more?
No, for sure. I mean, that is number one. I mean, there needs to be a public education drive. We need to kind of put it out there. I know that there are things going on out there, but the fact, I don't know how many people know that Alzheimer's is growing fastest in the Black community. How many people know some of the risk factors for Alzheimer's? And if anyone knows where to go for help if you have Alzheimer's, how do people know the signs of Alzheimer's? Again,
what are some of the signs? Do you know some of the signs?
Basically, there are signs where people are going to forget things. I think one of the things that they say is that you forget your keys, your car keys. I mean, we all do it, right? If we walk out the house and we forgot the car keys, but at least we remember where we put it. We can go back into the house and we can kind of like figure out where we left it. Someone who has Alzheimer's is going to forget their keys. They're going to forget that they forgot their keys, and they're going to not remember where they left it, basically. So they're going to forget family members' names. I mean, sometimes, yes, you see somebody and it's like, what's your name again? What's your name again? That person who has Alzheimer's is going to forget that he or she even has a relationship with that person.
Wow.
So those are some of the signs that distinguishes like forgetfulness from like Alzheimer's. And oftentimes family members, if they don't recognize it, they're going to make excuses for it when they see it. They're going to say, it's just a little forgetfulness or whatever. So those are some of the things that we need to kind of look at. But again, I think the Alzheimer's Society are kind of recommending that, again, test early. I know I mentioned earlier that some professionals are scared to get that, recommending people to get tested early. Some people are scared about getting tested early, but some of the recommendations are that you get tested early. If there are signs, then there are certain medications that can be used, but again, it just slows down the disease. I think the Alzheimer's Society's goal basically is get tested early, get onto any medications that are available to slow down the disease, because I said there's still no cure. Slow down the disease, with the hope that by the time the Alzheimer's kicks in, there is a cure. So they're still working on this cure.
And with all of the research that I've been looking at, I didn't see a particular age, and I don't know if that's because I didn't come across it or there isn't an age. So that was quite worrying. So, is that something that you know or got an idea of?
Yes. Basically, they are detecting Alzheimer's at earlier and earlier ages. I mean, I know somebody in their 40s that, again, has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Wow. And once somebody has a diagnosis, what is the sort of like, and I know this is, you may or may not know this, Terry, but do we know the life expectation of somebody once they've sort of been Alzheimer's, or is it something that somebody can live with right the way through into?
Basically, they say, again, and then it depends on how much you want to look into it or believe it. But basically, again, the research literature says 7 to 10 years. Once you're diagnosed,
Oh
life
my
expectancy is
gosh.
about 7 to 10 years. However, I met somebody the other day who she was diagnosed 10 years ago. And before she told me she was diagnosed, I wouldn't have known that she had Alzheimer's. Apparently, she was on a clinical trial. She was getting treatment, and obviously it slowed down the progression of her disease. So again, prior to meeting her, I was always very, very suspicious, I should say, of new medication. I'm from the Black community, I guess. I'm kind of like one of those as well that very kind of reticent when it comes to treatments and stuff like that. But like I said, I have met a couple of people who have been on clinical trials, and I've seen they've been diagnosed, like, let's say 10 years ago, and unless they told me, I wouldn't have known. So there is something or appears to be something for when it comes to these medications. But as I mentioned earlier, there isn't enough, in my book, hasn't been enough testing, enough research, enough trials within our community to say that, okay, this is going to work for us. I mean, again, the consensus is that Alzheimer's kind of like is going to affect anyone, irrespective of race, gender, culture, religion, nationality, whatever. Yeah. But again, I still think that research needs to be done. More research really needs to be done.
Wow, there's so much here, isn't there? It's just
yeah. I mean, the thing about it is that, as I say, my approach has always been with the needs of the caregivers, because I've been like working with this community for quite a while, so I've seen kind of like a period where there were certain medications that were out there, Seroquel, Memantine, Lessep, which I can't say that how much effect they had. I never really had too much faith in those. A lot of caregivers kind of said the same. But there are new medications coming out now, and they are talking about, yes, they are making progress. But I've seen caregivers when there wasn't this kind of hope. So they were basically day to day having to watch their loved ones just slowly decline. So as I say, it's not even that the physical part of having to increasingly help that person with their physical needs, but that decline when you have to see someone that you love no longer even remember who you are.
It's that in itself is just so emotive and deteriorating for both parties, because somebody having to catch themselves and think, even at the beginning stages, that they don't remember family, and then family being in the receiving end of the loved ones not remembering. And forgive me for keep looking down, it's because I'm looking at all of the research and some of the information, and it speaks here about people from the Black community having lower use of formal services. So again, here we have access, opportunity to have access, knowledge, where there are lower financial resources. Does that mean I can't afford to get a therapist? I can't afford to get specialist care? Does that mean that my relative isn't going to live another 10 years as much as it is my neighbor who's white and perhaps, has, or the people across the road or across the other side of town, because they're able to have access to more resources, which mean their family member lives longer.
Well, it isn't even the family member that lives longer; it's the caregiver or the carer. Because like I said, that they're, oftentimes the carer is going to be doing a great job in difficult circumstances. They're going to be doing a great job because they love the person that they're taking care of. So they're probably going to be doing oftentimes a great job making sure that person is fed, clean, has that roof over their head. They have everything that they need. But what about the caregiver? Caregiver is looking after the person who has Alzheimer's. Okay, who's taking care of the caregiver?
That's it.
So,
well, we are going to go into our final break, just for a minute, into our commercial break, and we will be right back just for the very, very, very last part of the show. Please do not touch that dial. We are talking about Alzheimer's, dementia, and the factors, very important factors about how it's affecting people in the Black and minority community. This is for you, listeners. Please do not touch that dial. We'll be right back.
We provide official certification, and our experienced and highly qualified imams are available to provide you with guidance when needed. MQI London is based at 292 to 296 Romford Road, Forest Gate. We are open from Monday to Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. or alternatively, call us now on 0208 257 1786.
Did you know? Product misuse is the leading cause of accidental fires in British homes, with numbers rising by over a third since 2009. Millions are making basic electric safety blunders without realizing the risks. With modern living, our homes are fitted with more electrical appliances than ever before. Stay safe, avoid overloading sockets, unplug when not in use, and never use damaged cords. Your safety matters. For further information, please visit us on www.electricalsafetyfirst.org.uk.
Have you just moved to the UK? You could open an account with...
Hello and welcome back, and thank you so much for listeners for staying on the line. You are locked into ReviveFM on the Power Hour with my guest today, Mr. Terry Duncan, also known professionally as Lessep T. Duncan. We are talking all things about how Alzheimer's and dementia affects people in the Black community, most especially the caregivers. And we are going now to just be speaking about what are some of the solutions. What should organizations be thinking about? What should the government and its partners be thinking about? And whilst we were doing that little short commercial break, I was talking to Terry about, for example, somebody that is employed, either full-time or part-time, and caregiving full-time or part-time for someone with Alzheimer's. Should these organizations, for example, be thinking about how they can support their employees with flexible working? So, what are some of the solutions? What should we be thinking about going forward?
First thing I wanted to do is distinguish between informal caregivers and working caregivers. I mean, the informal caregivers, when I mentioned that, is basically family members taking care of their loved ones, and then you have the people that are paid to come and assist family members take care of their loved ones. So in terms of family caregivers, we may want to think about whether or not we should pay family caregivers. I'm not sure of the precise amount, but I'm quite sure that family members that are taking care of their loved ones probably save the public health service in the billions of pounds. Because if they weren't doing it, then their loved ones may be like in a nursing home or some kind of facility that, obviously the public purse would have to pay for. So you're talking about family caregivers saving society, saving the country billions of pounds. So if we was to pay caregivers, that would save on the public purse. I'm sure a lot of family caregivers would prefer to be paid to take care of their loved ones. In terms of the formal caregivers, people that are actually paid to come in to help family caregivers or people with Alzheimer's, basically increase their pay. I think it's a pretty much a low-paying job. I think, and again, it would save on the public purse if there were these services for people who have Alzheimer's and their family members that are taking care of them. I think the other thing that we need to do as a society is to acknowledge, as I use the word cultural, or the phrase cultural humility. I think that needs to be brought more to prominence. And as Louise mentioned earlier, it is about acknowledging our biases, acknowledging the fact that there are different ways of caring for people from different cultures, and we really need to listen to people and give them that platform to speak, to give voice to their experiences, so that we apply the services in the most effective and then probably in the most cost-effective way. Rather than try to just throw services at people, if we really apply the services more specifically and tailor it to the needs of the people that need help, we have better services at a better rate. If we want to think of it in monetary terms. And again, I think that obviously we do. When I say services, I think the services that are really needed. That I found that adult daycare is a great service, where you can take a loved one, have them spend the day with staff that are equipped, capable and qualified to take care of them, whilst you as a caregiver can
have a break.
Exactly. And knowing that your loved one is being fed, they're getting social interaction, they're communicating with other people, they're interacting with other people, and more than likely when they come home, they're a little bit exhausted and maybe they just go straight to bed, or at least they're less restless. So it's I think the adult daycare is a great service for both the person that has Alzheimer's and the person taking care of them. Support groups for the caregiver, so that they share their experiences with people who have similar situations. I think obviously it's going to foster camaraderie. It's going to let caregivers know that they're not alone. They're not in this alone. There are people out there that are going through the same thing as them, and give them, and obviously provide like ideas, tips. What do you do in this situation? I'm dealing with this. I can't get my loved one to go into the bath. I can't get my loved one to go and shower.
So sharing of information.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. How do you do it? Everyone's situation is different, but there's something that we can use from each other. As Louise mentioned again, therapy, counseling, for caregivers, because as I say, we need to give voice to the caregivers' experiences, and we need to allow them to acknowledge that they have a life to live as well. Oftentimes, again, the caregivers are going to give up their life, adjust what they're doing. There are caregivers that probably give up their jobs to take care of their loved ones. So we need to acknowledge that, get our caregivers to acknowledge what they are doing for their loved one. Sometimes they may feel guilty. Sometimes they feel angry. Sometimes they may feel resentment because they're taking care of their loved ones and they cannot go to work. They cannot go and see their friends anymore. They can't
Absolutely.
Go. So we need to kind of like acknowledge that. It's okay to feel that way. But it's once we acknowledge it, then okay, we can address it. So I think that counseling therapy is really, really important. And then just, again, as Louise mentioned, the respite care, just get somebody in to give our caregivers a bit of a break once in a while. If they want to go out for a beer, if they want to go, to the wine bar, have a glass of wine or whatever, meet a friend, play cards, just acknowledge the fact that they have a life. They are worthwhile human beings as well. And that's from like I said, that's from the caregiver side of things.
Yeah. So. I think as well, it's so important to acknowledge that our environment plays such a major factor, and the way that the environment has an effect on people from specific areas, and why those people need so much more care. And I'd just like to give a shout out to anybody listening today that is a caregiver, and just let them know hey, you're all doing a fantastic, amazing job. Give yourself, a hug, a pat on the back, or whatever that may be. And just like to say, just well done. You're not alone. I do plan on sharing this with my professional community in the hope that it enables teaching and learning and opportunities for people to reach out and bridge those gaps that Terry was talking about at the very, very, very big beginning of the show, about where it is that, some of the things that we need to do. And as we draw now closer to the end of the show, I'm going to ask you a fun fact question. Before I do, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything else regarding Alzheimer's and dementia that you'd like to say as we come to a close?
Again, it's growing fastest in our community, and as much as I understand, I've had those talks myself about to what extent do I trust the medications, the treatments, the research, the trials. It is growing. So something needs to be done. First things first, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that if someone in our community has Alzheimer's, we need to acknowledge that. And we need to acknowledge the fact that if we are caring for someone, our role is going to change. Okay, that is still your father, that's still your mother. And we need to acknowledge how difficult it is. And just because it's difficult, doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job, as Louise pointed out. And so to acknowledge that you need help is not an acknowledgement that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It's not an acknowledgement that, you're not up to the job. I'm sure we all need help.
Yeah.
At all times, we all need help. So especially when you're taking care of a loved one, don't look at it as, there's something wrong with you when you get angry with your loved one because they're not doing the things that they used to do. It's not the loved one, it's the disease. So don't ever look down on yourself that you're doing something wrong, that you're not capable just because things have changed. But don't let it stop you looking for help, basically. Don't let it stop you from reaching out for help. It would be great, if you could reach out to another family member to help you. That would be great. That would be great as well. Whether that family member is going to help you or not is another question, but that would be great. But obviously, where I'm coming from is that there needs to be, and where there is, I'm not saying there is, or is it sufficient, but where there is that formal help for you to reach out to, don't deny yourself that opportunity to get that help.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out, and I can't thank you enough for what you've done today, coming on the show and highlighting this very, very important debilitating disease, Terry, and for sharing that with the world today. And this is going to be in the archive forever, in the techno archive, so it will always be accessible. People can always draw upon your experience and expertise. So as the show ends, I just wanted to ask you a question. If you had to give some advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Don't be scared to take chances. To grab the bull by the horns more, I think.
Be more risk adverse.
Not risk averse. Risk taking.
Yes.
Maybe take a few more risks. I'm not a risk taker. Maybe when I would say that there are times to take to kind of like be a bit more bolder.
Take the bit more confidence with things.
Right. Believe in yourself, for sure. You always believe in yourself.
And that's a beautiful note to end with. Always believe in yourself, and that's going out to everybody. That a bit of advice to the younger generation from my uncle there about what he would have said to his younger self, and going out to all of the caregivers and everybody that's working really, really, really hard in the background. We know that from statistics, it says that a caregiver in the Black community is what is, you know, supporting their family member on average 40 hours a week, some of them without any accessibility of support or anyone from any sort of formal background stepping in there. So, you know, we've got to give a shout out again to our caregivers. Thank you ever so much for those who's been locked in, or those of you been locked into the Power Hour today, as usual on Revive FM. We will see you again on Thursday. I realize that it's not my usual show day today, so thank you for those of you who locked in, and those of you who are back with me again on Thursday at 12 o'clock noon. See you same place, same time. Have a lovely, lovely day. And thank you so much to my wonderful guest person, Paul Lee, for being here. Thank you so much, Uncle Terry, for joining us.
No, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
We have been so privileged to have you, and that's the most important thing, that you was here today to give your expertise and your time. So thank you ever so much.